So we'll move on to the game tonight, the first leg of the EFL Cup semi-final against Newcastle. Huge, huge opportunity for a first leg lead at home. We were talking just off camera actually, what would be a good lead for Arsenal to go to St James's Park with. You were saying that, say a 1-0 or 2-1 advantage, it won't suffice. Do you think Arsenal really need to try to win this first leg by, say, 2 or 3 goals to go to St James's and think, yeah, we're confident we can get to Wembley?
Yeah, I mean, I think they need a two-goal lead. I mean, you look at the last couple of games at St James's, Arsenal haven't scored a goal. They've lost 1-0 in each of the last two games in the league and have barely really threatened Newcastle in either of those games. And that second leg is going to be super hostile. It's that, I've been under the lights at St James's Park on normal nights. It's hostile enough, but in a cup semi-final with a trip to Wembley on the cards for a Newcastle side who haven't won a club who haven't won a piece of silver in about 50 years or whatever it is, that is going to be a really incredibly difficult 90 minutes for Arsenal up there. So they need something to protect. They need a lead. And, look, what you wouldn't say no to a 1-0 lead, any sort of advantage you would take. But I think they've got to be looking at this and hoping they can get themselves to two goals. But it's going to be really hard. Arsenal, we saw how tired they looked against Brighton. That was only a couple of days ago. And Newcastle arriving here full of confidence on a hell of a winning run with the best striker in the league potentially at the moment in Alexander Isak, who's scoring week after week. They are going to fancy it, Newcastle, tonight, no doubt about it. They've just come down to North London and won at Spurs a couple of days ago, so they will fancy it. This is going to be a really difficult two legs for Arsenal. I think when the draw was made, Arsenal fans probably looked at it and were thinking, Newcastle, I'll take that, because it avoids Liverpool, it avoids the horrible, nauseating prospect of two semi-finals against Tottenham, which, as an Arsenal fan, I just can't deal with. Two North London derbies a season is bad enough, let alone four. So probably looked at Newcastle and thought that's the best draw possible. But I think now, as the game's got here, it's probably the hardest one on paper, given thought. So it's going to be a really tough night for Arsenal. I think 2 goals has definitely got to be the aim.
Yeah, I was definitely thinking when I saw the balls come out of the park, I thought, okay, Newcastle is definitely the best, but now I'd probably take Tottenham instead, but it is what it is. You mentioned there about, Isak, that front three of Newcastle just in devastating form. Jacob Murphy's been fantastic. Anthony Gordon, we know his quality. They've scored 2 goals in each of their last 8 games, but they do have two key suspensions for this
Mm.
game. Both Guimaraes and Fabian Schär are out, and they coped well without because Schär was suspended for the Tottenham game. Sven Botman came back in, did pretty well, but Guimaraes, heavily linked with Arsenal in the past. He's so central to the way they play. Everything goes through him. So is his absence, Arsenal have to capitalise on that, don't they?
You'd think so, yeah. I mean, that midfield's been so key to them, and Bruno and Joe Linton and Tonali. It's got a really good mix of aggression, creativity, quality, technique. And yeah, to not have Bruno tonight is definitely a blow for them. There's no doubt about that. And Arsenal, you would hope, would look to take advantage. The fact that Jurriën Timber's back's a big thing, because you can move him back into right back, and then you can put your strongest midfield out if everyone's fit and available, and this illness has has gone a little bit. I mean, Martin Odegaard trained yesterday. He looked happy enough in training yesterday. So you would think he probably comes back into the starting lineup. You can have Thomas Partey back at the base of midfield with probably Declan Rice moving up alongside Odegaard. That's a strong midfield for Arsenal. And without Bruno, you would think that's got to be a sort of area that they can target to try and sort of wrest control of the game from. So yeah, it's going to be a really difficult game, and there's a rivalry between Arsenal and Newcastle. Anyone who's been to these games over the last couple of seasons, home and away, can sort of testify to that. There's some needle between the squads, between the players, between the benches, between the fans. It's just going to add to the sort of atmosphere over these two legs. I think today it's going to be a feisty affair. I'll be very surprised if we don't see a red card over these two legs. Very, very surprised.
Yeah, I remember. I think it was January 2023 was that goal, that really frustrating goalless draw, and I can just see a repeat of that again, almost exactly 2 years later. But
That's kind of that game's where the rivalry almost started, really.
yeah,
Like, Arsenal really got under Arsenal's skin that day, and it's kind of gone from there and built from there. And then we've seen the big incidents in some of the games that that have happened since then. But it sort of all traces back to that 0-0 was where the rivalry really started to grow.